Hello, welcome, welcome. So I am Jessica McElveen, and I have a really special guest with me today who you'll be hearing from. So Anne is with us, and Anne and I met a couple of weeks ago on let's call it a tour bus, okay? Tour bus of Brisbane. And Anne started sharing with me her journey as a mum, her journey as a mum of her son, who is now 38, who was diagnosed with Asperges at the age of 23. And, you know, when Anne was sharing with me her journey and what she'd experienced and learnt and insights and what she was committed to through those 38 years and still does, it just absolutely astounded me. And I knew that there was so much wisdom and probably a lot of lessons that parents with younger children, that which is probably you, could really learn from. There's a whole lot of pressure on what to expect and what's normal and not normal, and, you know, what's right and wrong around children that are not the norm, whatever that might mean to you. So I thought, let's do this, let's have a chat, and I want to hear everything that Anne has to say. So welcome, Anne.
Thank you.
Good morning. So I guess, Anne, let's start from the beginning, because that helps us understand maybe where a lot of mums and dads are at the moment, or have been at, or recently. So for you, just share, you know, when did you first notice something was different, or that it was a bit bizarre, or there was different challenges? Why don't we start there, if you could?
Well, I noticed, first start, I was opal mining and my husband went back opal mining. So I was on my own with Michael. I was with him for at least 5 days after being in hospital for 2 weeks with Michael. Michael never slept. I think that was one of the first things, that he never slept. And being a new mum and being on my own, and you know, I relied on nursing mothers actually to make the phone calls at 10 o'clock at night, crying my eyes out. And Michael, you know, would wake at 1 and he'd still be awake at 5. And then we had to go back to Minterby, to the opal fields, when he was 5 months old. And I'd learned by then that music calmed Michael. We also had a shop, and when his father came back, we had been together building this shop, and then all of a sudden I've got this child that won't settle. And anyway, when he was settled and I was in the car, I used to take him to the shop, and the minute he got in the shopping complex, he started to scream as a baby. And so my loving husband said, I can't do with this baby in the shop. You're going to have to go home. So I would cry all the way home. So lots of tears, lots and lots and lots of tears and loneliness, right from day one, really.
Yeah, wow. Okay. And I guess, so that was around 5 months of 5 months of age he was then. So I guess we're fast forward a little while then to when he could maybe walk or maybe talk, or, you know, just talk us through the bit older years when he was a toddler, or, you know, maybe when he started school, and what was those experiences like for you?
Well, I suppose one of the things was he wasn't focused. That was, you know, like, Michael, mummy's here. Look at mummy, you know. He just didn't do what I've been around a lot of babies. I'd got stepchildren, and he threw me completely, because at 3, you know, he just wasn't focused. He would do things like, you know, I'd go blah, 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 and he'd copy those things, but music always calmed him. And so whether I put on Beethoven or nursery rhymes, and I was a great believer that, you know, I should experience, he should, I suppose I had these ideals, expose him to a lot of things. So I didn't just put nursery rhymes on. I literally, he listened to documentaries. I read him all kinds of books, but he just steeped it in. He didn't talk. He walked at 1 year, but he didn't talk. He didn't talk till he was about 18 months or 20 months old, much. You know, might have said dad or something, but and that was a little bit of a concern. But when he talked in sentences, and his dad, we lived on the opal fields and the flies were really bad. And his dad used to say, piss off flies. And the first words he spoke was a sentence of piss off flies. I'll never forget it. He just, and I said, oh my goodness, you must stop saying this, like he can repeat it. And from then on, his vocabulary was amazing. I mean, at 5, we'd go out for dinner. He'd sit with everybody else bar me. And I spent my whole time saying, Michael, come back to mummy. No, it's all right. He's interesting. You know, he's fine. And he'd recite these, his interests were, you know, like obsessions, I suppose, were whales and things like that, trucks. And he would recite these adult books, like whole paragraphs of callosities and all the different things and why they have callosities and how they eat and how they open their mouth and why they have this fish and what it happens to it. And he's 5. And it was like, how does he remember all that, you know? So there was, even from that age, there was like this great extreme of, he was super intelligent, he was super clever, he was, you know, and then he was totally unfocused. He didn't know his spatial awareness. You had to remind him all the time. He wouldn't sleep. He'd be, you know, late at night and it'd be, oh, for God's sake, will this child ever go to sleep? You know, and so I was exhausted. And because I breastfed him, a lot of people, you know, wanted to stop me breastfeeding. And for me, that was a thing that Michael calmed Michael. And it was a bond and it was a security and it was I felt it was something for him that he was in control of, if you know what I mean. It was, with me, he was totally safe. So that bond with Michael has gone on forever, still.
Yeah.
No, I think I told you on the bus, and he still says this, and he goes, I'd be nothing without you, Mum. I'd be nothing, you know, and he calls me Mama. And I must admit, for the first 25 years of his life, I saw him every day. I was in touch with him every day.
And so I remember on the bus trip too, you were saying that, you know, all of the different things that you were doing with him, because he had a mind that just wanted to know everything. He was so curious. And, you know, he's 38 now. So let's say, you know, 30 to 38 years ago, there wasn't, as you said at the start, there just wasn't as much information or support out there, or awareness or acceptance, or, you know, whatever word you want to use. So how did you learn all of this? And I know one of the things that you mentioned to me was this sense of, you know, you have to trust your intuition, right, as the mum. So I'd love you to share a little bit about that journeying as well.
I got a lot of ridicule, and people used to say to me, you know, he's very hard to love. And to be honest, I beat myself up a bit at the beginning. You know, I can remember he was 3 and it was so frustrating. I mean, nothing seemed to work, you know, initially, nothing seemed to work. And so I remember at 3, oh, Michael, you know, I was so frustrated. And then I thought to myself, he can't help the body he's born into. And I've got to pull myself together, like, and that is when I started, well, obviously people thought he was different. So they, checked his hearing. Can he hear properly? Yes, he can hear properly. I started taking him to different places. I ended up taking him to I can remember taking him to a doctor, and he nearly dismantled the whole place. He was such a curious child. He was looking in everything, and the doctor laughed, and he said, I've never had a child that's completely checked every corner out before. And it was like, come here, Michael, all the time. I'm English. I was trying to, bring him up like all my family had been brought up, which was, and he was everything. He loved burping. He loved farting. He would say things that everybody else was thinking. The words poured out of his mouth. And, in a shopping center one day, he was in his pushchair because he wouldn't walk. He was just a big boy, and I'm only 5 foot, and he was big, and he would just lie on the ground. So I used to take a pushchair for a long time because I couldn't physically pick him up. And he would pull himself forward in this pushchair, and he would say, "Why are you so fat?" to the woman in front. And I'd go, "Michael, please stop. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." It was like, he used to embarrass me all the time.
Yeah.
He used to go to Kmart, and he used to lose himself on purpose so he could go to the front reception to have his name over the tannoy. Could Michael Blythe, Mummy, I've got a little boy at the front in a red t-shirt. He says his name's Michael. Could his mummy come to the front? And he did it like 3 times in one session. He would do these obsessive behaviors. And so I just want to talk about a few behaviors, because behaviors were really tapping. Repeat, tap, tap, tap on a desk. Michael, stop tapping, darling. Tap, tap, tap. Michael, did you hear Mummy? Stop tapping. Tap, tap, tap. Michael, stop it. And you'd hold his leg, but he would still do it. There was this obsession. He'd ask questions, he'd ask really, "Can I have an orange, Mummy?" "Yes, darling." "But can I have an orange?" "Yes, I said you can have an orange." "I want an orange, Mummy." "Yes, darling, you can." So your patience was really stretched, like you just couldn't imagine. So my journey went on looking for things and getting him looked at, specialists, occupational therapists, as I say, his eyes, his hearing, taking him to a doctor. They thought at first he had ADHD, but he wasn't swinging from a chandelier. He wasn't, wrecking anything. He was just in himself, if you know what I mean. People used to say to me, children don't jump off. They never climb higher than they feel safe. They never go, on a pier and would fall off. What? Michael, get down from that tree. Well, he didn't do too much of that, but because I'm not very good at heights and I can't swim, so I was always on edge. It wasn't the most relaxing parenting I've ever done, but it meant that I studied a lot. It meant that I decided I wouldn't have any more children, that I would stop for a while, because Michael needed my total attention, and living on the Opal Fields was a gift, I felt, because Western society, I found, weren't very accepting
Mm.
of his difference at school, um, and different things like that. So, like even breastfeeding. So I used to tell myself, but what if you were in a tribe, Anne, you know, and we don't have the community around us that you know, like I had when I was a little girl. I went to my nanny's every Thursday, and all my aunties were there.
Sure.
So we had a family thing, and I didn't have that so much. So yeah, I just focused on educating myself, and so Michael got a lot of attention, I suppose. And I did lots of exercises. I jumped on the trampoline with him every day. I made books. We used to go on nature walks. This is, you know, in his early years. I'd talk to him about, you know, how does that feel, or, you know, as much as I could. Because, of course, these children are very obsessed with smells, textures, all those things. He was, you know, can't eat this because it doesn't feel, you know, he'd be shoving his spaghetti bolognese in his mouth, and I'd say, is it nice, Michael? Not really, he'd say.
Yeah. And so I guess one of the biggest things that I feel like people love to know, especially now that Michael's 38 and you can look back on your journey, and is was there a pivotal moment where it was you went from being embarrassed and feeling worried for him and about him all of the time? Was there a pivotal moment where you just dropped all of that expectation or judgment and just decided, okay, Michael is perfect the way that he is, and I don't give a toss what everybody else thinks. I'm now at peace with, you know, the relationship we have? You know, was there a pivotal moment for you or a big lesson that you can remember?
I think I started writing. I started writing for a preschool. I wrote an article about a child with a difference. I wrote in Nursing Mothers magazine, and then I wrote, because I lived on the Opal Fields, so that was a bit about living on the Opal Fields with a breastfeeding baby. But of course, he was an interesting baby to feed. And then preschool. I realized I couldn't take all his responsibility for him. And, you know, I tried to protect him from everything, and I couldn't, because the world is quite cruel. And I got good teachers and I got bad teachers. I got supportive teachers, and I got, you know, Michael grew up on the Opal Fields, and he used to just pull his pants down, and that's how he learned to do a wee in the dirt. And then we'd come back to the city and they'd say, oh, Mrs. Blythe, he pulls his pants down, you know, and he wees on the grass outside. And I said, well, tell him to pull his pants up, you know. And so it was a bit more, I became his advocate. I would do anything. I mean, I started realizing teachers don't know anything. I'm living with this child, and believe me, this child is perfect. I used to lay in bed with him, and he'd cry, and he'd say, Mummy, why am I like this? Mummy, why am I so different? Why is everything so difficult? I says, my darling, we are all different. And you are perfect. And we all have to learn to live with our differences. And, you know, so then I put him in anything he was experienced at. It just gave him lots of experiences. Like, he's musically talented. That music thing has always, and I realized how talented he was. like he could listen to a piece of music and then all of a sudden he'd be playing it, and he'd be playing this music, but that music he'd just heard would be coming through what he'd be playing. And he would have this look on his face where he'd go in a calm trance, if you like, while he actually played that. So I got him a music therapist, not a music teacher. And the music therapist, he taught him how to transpose chords. As I had 5 years of piano lessons, but I can't play. But well, you know what I mean. We talk too much, and and so he learned how to transpose the chords, which was great for him. So then I bought him an organ, and a better organ, and the organ. And at 10, he made. I thought, right, so he's good at music. I'll make him. He made a CD. I've got a CD that Michael made at 10, and you know, he's got a picture of himself on there, and he chose the names of all the songs, and we wrote a poem on there. It's a very, his father, I think, wrote a poem, and so it's a very family thing that we did. So he did that. But I also used to expose him to experiences. Like I would, we lived on the Opal field, so consequently I would get him on a scraper ride or a D9, you know, bulldozer sitting in the cabin, or I'd take him to the flying doctor who flew in every month, whether we needed him or not, you know, and I'd get them to show him around the airplane and the cabin. I'd take him down to Canberra because we lived in Canberra, and I'd take him to Ansett, and I would say, oh, can we, you know, go and have a look in the planes? And in those days, you know, they let you. And when we were on a flight, you know, often we flew to Alice Springs, just him and I, to go to the opal mine. And you know, I'd say, oh, I'm a nervous flyer, but, you know, come, and we'd sit and land in the cabin at the front with the pilot.
Wow.
Michael was just in his element, you know, he knew everything. So we had some wonderful experiences, you know. And then as time went on, seriously, he was my gift. You know, he wasn't my challenge that I'd seen it, like he just wasn't conforming. He was my gift. And I learned so much. Just imagine if I hadn't had him, I would not have learned so much, you know. And I went to this occupational therapist, and she, you know, said that because Michael's vestibulocism, which was off, right? And so his spatial awareness and where he was in space. So that was a very big thing, because then if you can get his right and left hemisphere working together, that they can actually work better, you know. And so she gave me exercises. So I'd roll him in a mat and, like, you know, and unroll him again, and I'd do soldier crawling and things like that. I had an orange and a broomstick, and we'd go around things I don't know, because we lived in the desert, probably tins or something, you know, go around tins so there was all that type of thing. Every day we built this trampoline in the desert that was, you know, so he had to climb up these steps and go through a drum and then get on the top, and then we did games together on the trampoline every day.
Yeah.
And so there was just endless things I did. And one of the things was, of course, Michael, mummy's here. Michael, mummy's here. And then I realized that he couldn't read facial expressions really well, you know. So we used to have games, you know. We had games, you know. Is mummy happy?
Okay.
Or is mummy sad? you know, and we kind of, this is a sad face, this is a happy face, this is, you know, I'm not any interested face, you know, or whatever. So what's mummy now? You know, mummy's being a clown, you know. What's mummy?
Yeah. And it amazes me, you know, when you're sharing all of these stories, and because this is what therapists do now, right? When there's a whole lot of research out there now, and there's a lot of training out there now, and this is just something that you figured out along the way. Everything that you've shared today, this is, you know, you just really tapped into who he was and what he needed, which is just the most amazing part of all of this. You made that your priority, and you know, it's taken therapists, you know, decades to learn, you know, what might work or might help them, help children of various, you know,
Repetition is key.
And repetition is key. You're right. I constantly share that too with the parents I work with. So I'm interested, what do you think, looking back, you know, for the parents that are watching this, you know, they may have been able to relate to a lot of what you've shared, right? And a lot of the parents in this community, their children are definitely young. So, you know, between the ages of 0 to, you know, around 10 usually, you know, the very young children. So looking back, what would you have altered or changed? You know, what would be something that you would advise them not to worry about anymore? Or, you know, don't spend your time concerned about this because it does change. You know, what for them, based on where they may be at, what's something that you would have changed because it just didn't matter, or I learned later on that was really okay?
I think initially he was worrying about what other people, you know, trying to fit him into what people were expecting of him. You know, I could go to a cafe, for instance, and move all the sugar bowls or something away from him because he had 1,001 ways to spill everything, and he still spilled it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
How did it happen? So I think follow your intuition, talk to them one-to-one, face-to-face, give them that time. You know, with Michael, it was down to that level. What they're interested in, just pursue it because they're obsessed with it. In my day, the Fisher Price had a little tape recorder, and we used to travel 2,657 kilometers door to door. Can you imagine that in a car with a child like this?
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So people would go, oh my God, he can't even sit to go to the shops. That's true. They can't go to the shops. But I used to put the Fisher Price I used to have a special amount of things that he'd never seen in a special car bag. I used to have his tape recorder that he could put on his shoulder in his chair, and he could have it next to his ear and he could listen to stories, educational stories. They could be about the Bush Tucker Man. They could be Beethoven. They could be Air Supply. He loves Air Supply because Air Supply was very popular at that time, and his mummy loved Air Supply. And so he will now say, Mum, that's my favorite song, you know, Air Supply. He loves them. So I did lots of things. Yeah. Your question was, let me keep on subject because I've got so many things to say.
Yeah, I know you do. Of course you do. What's the best, let's just say it in a different way. What's just the best advice if you had a group of mums sitting in front of you and they're feeling lost and just overwhelmed with it all, and they just have no idea who to listen to, no idea what to do next? What would be your advice to them?
Follow your intuition. You know that child better than anyone. You know that child inside out and back to front, and never doubt yourself, ever. When people say, I used to have people come up to me, oh, if he was my child, I'd wallop him. Well, don't you think I haven't tried? That doesn't work. Oh, he's such a, they tell me what to do in the shopping centre.
Wow. Yeah.
Strangers would tell me how to parent. And I would say to them, do you think I'm brain dead? Don't you think I haven't tried all this? I'm doing my best with what I've got. And now they all think Michael's the best thing since sliced bread. He's fantastic. They've forgotten all what he did.
Sure.
And Michael goes, it's funny, isn't it, Mum? And I go, yep, mate, it's funny.
So tell me about him now then, right? He's 38. You've been able to go through all of these stories, lessons, learnings, him as a child. Tell me about him now and the life that he leads now.
Well, now he's a truck driver. And he's probably one of the best truck drivers, because the thing about these children is that they're loyal. They always arrive on time. They'll go the extra mile. They know everything about what they're doing. And while he's doing it, he's educating himself because he listens to documentaries. He listens to all kinds of things. So Michael is a very, very intelligent person with a knowledge. It's not Wales, just Wales, believe me.
He's expanded since then.
My partner now says, he's just like, it just blows him away on the amount of subjects. It can be anything, and he can have a conversation. But he's not one of these people that, like, when you meet him and his pants are hanging down and his knickers are showing and his mum is a lady, and it's like, Michael, pull your pants up. He's 38 and he's got a goatee and, and he looks like a truck driver, and he doesn't force it on you. In actual fact, you would not know necessarily when you meet him that he knows anything.
Yeah. And does he lead what's his personality like? Is he happy with what he's doing? Does he, have some close friends? A lot of parents worry about friendships and social.
They live on their own. Can they live on their own?
Yeah. So share a bit about that then.
Dad and I thought he would never live on his own. We couldn't see it. And to be honest, along the way, he shared houses, which were a nightmare. I then bought him a little cabin on a caravan park, because it wasn't too big, but it was on his own, and I could go and clean it and keep him up to, because they're not organized. But now he's had this girlfriend who's equally got some issues, but because he's a truck driver and they've been together now for 8 or 9 years, they live together, they've worked out they've worked it out. They're together, but they have their own bedrooms.
Okay.
They have their own toilets because he's not the cleanest.
Okay.
He goes and drives his truck, and so he's not with her, so she's got her space and he's doing his.
Yeah.
And then when they're together, they go and have dinner together, they do things together, they sometimes come to Canberra together. She sings, she's a bit musical, so they kind of work it out. But he's so kind. He's just, he never says anything bad about anybody, and he has been ridiculed. I mean, I think I told you that story. I just want to tell a story at school because they get picked on really bad. I mean, when he was back in Canberra, he got pounced on by 6 boys, and he came home covered in bruises where they'd punched him. And another time I went to pick him up because I eventually had 2 more babies, and I'm breastfeeding these 2 babies, and I've got Michael at school, and he was about 10. And I go to school to pick him up, and he's been in the courtyard all day. They put him in the courtyard. And he hadn't been in a lesson. And I said, why didn't you ring me up to get him? Oh, well, you know, he needed to learn a lesson. Well, what did he do? Well, we saw him ourselves. He punched somebody in the library. I said, but Michael's not violent. What would he have done? Like, why was he punched that person? Anyway, they wouldn't listen. After an hour of trying to, and Michael's crying, I get in the car and I say to Michael, what happened? And he said, Mummy, for 6 weeks, somebody's been pulling my hair at the back when I've not been looking. And so I decided I'd hit them in the library because there was loads of people around and they couldn't beat me up.
Okay.
And so I went back the next day, and I told them what had happened, and they said, oh, well, we'll check that boy, you know. And then, you know, they did check. But that's the sort of thing that happened. They'd give him suspension, you know, they don't parent, they don't teach properly, they don't discipline properly, they send them home, they then get behind in their work, they love it to be sent home. So who gets punished? Me.
Sure.
Because I was going to work and he's at school, and then here we go, 3 days a week I'm at home with Michael because they've decided they need to punish him and suspend him from school. So I got him tutored, I taught him myself, I did repetition in the car. I educated Michael, really. I think really I educated Michael.
No, I think you really did. Yeah, the amount of things, and no doubt what we've heard during this is only just a small part, of course.
Yeah. I've got so many stories.
I know, and I can feel it. And, you know, just from what you've shared though, Anne, is just, it's already such a beautiful picture of your whole world. And I know that so many people watching this is going to be able to relate to what you've shared. Thank you for sharing that story, because school really, it's a difficult place for some children, a really challenging place.
Well, can I just tell another story? You
Sure.
know, well, one of them is that I learned that children need to be at the front, right? So every time I would explain to the teachers every year, then teachers don't talk to teachers each year. They just hand them over, and you've, as a parent, have got to start all again, educating the teachers on how your child learns best, right? Michael's best at school at the front because has got less distractions. And, you know, I used to go in the class so I could help the teacher with the other students so she could focus on a difficult child. I did all that type of thing all the time, you know. But I wrote reams on how to deal with Michael, and, you know, I questioned them on why they didn't talk to each other. This is like ridiculous. One, you know, he had a good relationship with Mr. What's his name last year, and Miss Bloggs gets him this year, and she doesn't know one thing about him. How pathetic is the system? Another thing is, when I lived on the opal fields, I thought that would be better because there was only 36 children in the whole school from kindy to year 11.
Wow. Yeah.
And we got this, and some years it was, but we got this new teacher. And, you know, Michael was difficult in the class. He was disruptive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he would sharpen his pencil till they all disappeared, you know. Zzz, zzz, zzz. I mean, it was great. It was a new machine. I thought it was interesting myself. Anyway, they put him in the broom cupboard in the front reception with a desk, and he for 3 days a week. And they said it was so that he could, you know, if he were behaved, he could earn time back in the class. How do you think I felt dropping him off?
I have no idea, but
this is a system where, as a parent, you're supposed to trust it. And your children should be safe at school. And I used to drop him off, and I used to drive home crying my eyes out.
Yeah.
I used to go at recess at 11 o'clock to see, and they would say, "Oh, Mrs. Blythe, he's been off his chair 28 times in the last, whatever, you know, from 9:30 to 11.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say, do you know what? So would I.
Mm.
This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I argue and argue and argue.
Yeah.
I became his advocate.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They are wrong,
Mm.
and they deal with them poorly. The system is broken. And I put him in a religious school. They pray all over him. The reason I put them in the religious school is because I felt we need a rounded education.
Mm-hmm.
You see how people that don't have any religion then become very religious, or, you know, you need a rounded, you need to know what it's all about. That was my main thing. You need to know about everything.
Sure. Well, I mean, from what you've shared about Michael, it certainly sounds like he wanted to as well. He wanted to know everything. So, and as we finish up, and I really appreciate everything that you've shared today, I really do. Is there one final sentence that you would say that maybe you haven't had a chance to say? One final thing.
Believe in him, believe in your child, and believe in yourself. Mm-hmm. And they're made perfect. And they're given to you because you can deal with it too. You know, like I used to believe, thank goodness he's been given to me. Mm. Can you imagine if somebody had thrown him at the wall because he's frustrating?
Sure.
So and he has been the biggest gift to me, to make me a better person, to make me a better parent, to make me a better step parent to all my stepchildren. And I am blessed to have had him, even though it was the hardest thing. I think during that time, it was the very, very lots of tears, lots of tears.
Thank you. That's a beautiful end. I really appreciate your time, Anne. And for anyone who's watching this, if you have any questions, or, you know, you want to share anything after watching it, please do, you know, in the comments. And if there's any questions that you have, I'm more than happy to pass it on to Anne. Yes. But yeah, just thank you so much for sharing with us today, Anne. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, what a pillar of strength you've been for Michael. He's a lucky boy too, a lucky man too.
He's cute.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Anne. Thanks for being with us today. Bye, everyone.